Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I'm very pleased to be able to join with you today as part of the Arctic Circle Forum. The fact that we're here in beautiful Shanghai with participants from around the world speaks to the growing international interest in the Arctic. And I'd like to thank our Chinese hosts for their magnificent hospitality. I'd also like to take this opportunity to share some facts about Canada's north. When speaking in Arctic context, it's important to realize that the circumpolar Arctic is a large and very diverse area. The Arctic is central to Canada's identity. It comprises 40% of our landmass, and this in turn represents 25% of the total area of the Arctic. And we have the longest coastline at 162,000 kilometers with very little modern charting or marine infrastructure. As has been eloquently mentioned by every previous speaker today, the realities of climate change affect the daily lives of not only everybody in the north, but indeed the global population. And addressing these challenges is a central theme, indeed, not only of the Arctic, but of all our populations, as it is now probably, arguably, the crucial policy focus for all responsible citizens. As global interests increase in the region, we're cognizant of the impact that they may have on the people who live there, Indigenous and recently arrived. As reinforced at the recent Arctic Council ministerial earlier this week, or actually last week, the Arctic is an area of peace and stability, and by respecting the rules-based international order, it'll stay that way. So, for example, an issue close to Canadian hearts received a considerable amount of international attention and news coverage back home, certainly in Canada, and that had to do with Canada's Arctic sovereignty. Now, Canadians have every reason to be confident about this issue. With the exception of tiny little wee Hands Island, Canada's sovereignty over Arctic islands is undisputed. As for waterways in the Canadian Arctic, including those commonly referred to as the Northwest Passage, they are part of Canada's internal waterways. Let me say that again. The Northwest Passage are part of Canada's internal waterways. Canada is confident that international law is on our side. That being said, exercising sovereignty over those waterways does not mean that they're closed to the outside world or to foreign navigation. Canada welcomes navigation in its Arctic waters, provided certain rules focused on environmental protection, safety and security of the passengers and transients are respected. We also welcome cooperation with our international partners in finding the best ways to develop and support our mutual interests. The circumpolar Arctic is well known for its high level of international cooperation on a broad range of issues. Cooperation across the circumpolar world is and will remain critical for the future of the Arctic, and indeed it could act as a model for so many other endeavors around the globe. Bilaterally, Canada engages with all of its Arctic partners as we often share interests and face similar challenges. It is also increasingly important for Canada to engage with those far or not so close to the Arctic who wish to work with us in areas of common interest. This provides an opportunity for them to better understand the realities of the Arctic and Canada's north, and for us to understand better their point of view. Recently, for example, China has shown increasing interest in Arctic governance and affairs, as demonstrated in its Arctic Policy White Paper. Canada and China collaborate, both bilaterally and multilaterally, on a range of Arctic issues, including Arctic science, climate change, merchant Arctic shipping, and marine policy. Canada welcomes opportunities for further productive cooperation with China that advance Canada's Arctic interests and the interests of Canada's northern and Indigenous peoples, and in other matters that concern us both. From the flexibility and agility of the Arctic Council that gives equal voice to Indigenous Northerners, to the treaties that are specific to the Arctic and those that are already reducing pollutants, for example, to the practical cooperation in areas like emergency preparedness and response, safe shipping lanes, and most importantly, the overarching stability and peace that characterize the region, we are showing that collective responsibility can create good stewardship for a vital global resource. But you can't take it for granted. Arctic states can be proud of the Science Cooperation Agreement now in force that will help our scientists produce the data that we need to make informed decisions, as referred to by our first two speakers, and to incorporate the valuable content that Indigenous knowledge holders can bring to help solve complex global issues in the Arctic. Together with non-Arctic states, we can also be very proud of the agreement to prevent unregulated high seas fisheries in the Central Arctic Ocean, recently signed. For the Arctic Indigenous peoples, nobody has a better understanding of the North than those that actually live there. And nobody has more to lose than those lives which are being profoundly altered by change in the northern environment. The Arctic is a deeply connective part of the world that binds past, present, and future, and environmental protection is more than just protecting land, air, sea, and ice. It's about promoting and revitalizing Indigenous languages, cultures, and traditions that need a healthy climate to survive. It's about sustainable economic development, as mentioned by the two previous speakers in some detail, and the sustainable use of resources. We want to keep working closely with our Indigenous representatives and other Arctic Indigenous peoples to build resilience within communities. We've made strides in co-managing the Arctic with Indigenous peoples, in incorporating Indigenous knowledge and protection and management regimes, and ensuring that we respect traditional rights and use in protected zones, and we're enlarging those. A healthy Arctic indeed is vital for all of us. In the meantime, we're making new investments that complement activities already underway and underpin Canada's policy vision. Canada recently announced earlier this week that we'll be investing close to $30 million to enhance Canada's global Arctic leadership. And this commitment will go towards reconciliation, sustainable development, and meaningful participation in international fora. These investments are closely linked to investments at the national level of about $700 million over the next few years to support the development of physical and cyber infrastructure, improved health and education facilities for Northerners, amongst many, many other initiatives. As we make these and other investments, we're mindful of the fact that weather unpredictability is opening up the Arctic to new security threats. And these can affect our search and rescue capabilities, restrict our ability to operate efficiently in the Arctic, either individually and collectively along other allies and partners. So, ladies and gentlemen, the Arctic is a natural inheritance that we all share. The Arctic comprises 40% of Canada's landmass. Collectively, we are its custodians, but only temporarily, and we've been conferred the enormous responsibility of safeguarding it for those who will live here next. So though we may be its custodians today, it's the younger generations of the future that will inherit the good work that we will hopefully do together to ensure that the Arctic remains a natural global resource, treasured by all. Ladies and gentlemen, once again, thank you to the government of China for your hospitality for this conference, and I look forward to the rest of the couple of days. Thank you.